Welcome to Joe College Radio. I'm Miles King, joined by Jordan Lenderman, and this is part 3 of this week's podcast, where we answer some listener questions. Jordan, you've got them lined up, so let's hear them.
Yeah, and Beth Lenderman asks, at what point do the officials need to step in before something goes wrong, from an honest tackle to trying to strangle someone? And of course, this is in reference to Ben Boulware's tackle on Lamar Jackson. Miles, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate right here, Jordan.
Really?
Now, obviously, that play, I will admit, was a little bit dirty, but I've got to say, don't you want your middle linebacker, the leader of your defense, to have a little bit of nasty in him? If you're going up against an offense, you want to have somebody who's not afraid to get under his opponent's skin, and that's obviously kind of what your job is as a defender, is to get under your opponent's skin, specifically the quarterbacks. And he obviously did, evidenced by Lamar Jackson's outburst. Probably deserved outburst, but still on the sideline, and he was visibly upset. But did Ben Boulware cross the line? That's debatable. You could definitely make a strong case, but I've got to say it's part of your job to kind of get under your opponent's skin, and of course, stuff like that happens in the pile all the time, and we're not able to see this. So this is probably just encroaching on what kind of dirty stuff goes on in the pile where we can't see it.
Yeah, but Miles, if you see something like this happen, and it's just obvious, you can see it on replay and everything, you have to do something. Otherwise, players are going to injure players consistently, and you're not going to be able to defend those players who are helpless. And I think anytime something like this happens, this is a new rule that I would institute. Anytime that something like this happens, the referee should stop the game to review the severity of the event. And I know what you're thinking, if people start to fake it to save time or rest or whatever, if that happens, because some teams do fake injuries and it would be the same thing for that, the referee can assess a 15-yard penalty if they think that it's not severe enough to cause an ejection or whatever penalty they might assess with that. And I would also include a 10-second runoff in the last 2 minutes of the game or 2 minutes of the half if it's by the team that needs the extra time. So I think that's a good way to punish both teams. If one, the player was lying about the severity of the injury, or if two, he actually was, and the referees need to protect him.
Yeah, that definitely would be an aggressive policy trying to combat stuff like this. We'll see if something like this gets instituted, maybe, if there is a review process. But I think you're going to be looking at many, many more plays if something like this happens, and probably a lot of them won't be able to see. I bet Ben Boulware did that because he thought nobody will be able to see them since they were in the middle of the pile.
Probably.
But, yeah, it was definitely a questionable, but he definitely got the result he wanted by getting under Lamar Jackson's skin. And did that affect Lamar Jackson's play? Did it just fire Lamar Jackson up even more? Who knows? But definitely a questionable play by Ben Boulware there.
Yeah, and then our second question of the night is provided by SC King. And he asks, do all college coaches secretly despise Nick Saban? If he wasn't killing at Alabama, wouldn't Les and others still be employed? Miles, what are your thoughts there?
I think absolutely everybody does, because he is just, the dominance they have had in recent years is almost incomparable. You've got to go decades and decades back to find anything like this. Winning, I think, 4 national titles now. Do they have 4 national titles?
Yes.
Since he's been coach. He's got, if not one of the top recruiting classes. This weekend, in fact, he secured the signing of the number 5 player in the nation, and Alabama now has 3 of the top 5 recruits in the nation committed to them for the 2017 class.
Wow.
On the football field, dominating, and off the field on the recruiting trail, you've got to think coaches are just getting so frustrated. Because as soon as Bama comes after anybody you're recruiting, it's game over at that point.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to put a disclaimer on this. You guys, just bear with me. My comparison that I'm about to make will be a bit of a stretch. Maybe it might sound sacrilegious, but bear with me. It'll make sense in the end. So, like I said, this comparison is going to be a bit of a stretch. I'm going to go for it. Nick Saban is like Jesus, and all of the other coaches are like James, who is Jesus' brother. So obviously, it's tough to live up to Jesus' expectations. Like, imagine James whenever Jesus cleans his room and James doesn't clean his room, or Jesus heals someone of leprosy and James is like, oh, I didn't heal someone of leprosy, but I cleaned my room this time. So obviously, it's tough to live in Jesus' shadow, which I'm sure James is frustrated at. But you also have to love the guy because Jesus is awesome, and he's the best at what he does in the same way that Nick Saban is the best at what he does. Now, of course, I'm referring to Nick Saban in not a savior of the world kind of way, but in a being the best at what he does kind of way. And other coaches have to get frustrated time to time because of his success. Look at Les Miles. He's with a minimum of 25 games coached. Les Miles has the highest overall rating or win percentage above, guess who? Nick Saban. I think that Les would still be there, and of course they all despise him. Maybe not so secretly as we think with people like Harbaugh coming after him now. You also have to admire the guy for the success that he's had in the field. Envy would be a good word to use.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think that's a fair comparison to make, Jordan. I mean, did Jesus win 4 national titles?
That's true. Jesus did not win 4 national titles.
Did Jesus pull in a top 5 recruiting class every single year?
He had the 12 best, Miles. He had the 12 best for 3 years.
That's true. He had possibly one of the smallest but best recruiting classes of all time in the 12 disciples.
Yes.
So I guess Jesus does have Nick there. But I do like that comparison.
Thank you. And I would love to hear you guys' comments on that comparison. Just make sure to tweet at us about anything that we talk about on the pod. But let's move on to the next question. We have @GBryan_50, who writes, who wins the Red River rivalry matchup? We covered this a little bit earlier. Miles, what are your thoughts here?
It's going to be OU. Like we said in part 2 in the preview for next week, OU inexplicably lost this game last year. They're going to be mad. They're going to be looking for revenge. They're going to be looking for a statement that they're going to compete for the Big 12 title, whereas Texas is reeling now after 2 straight losses. The defense is in turmoil. The coordinator just got demoted, and Charlie Strong now taking over defensive play calling. Just a perfect storm in OU's favor, and you've got to be worried if you're a Longhorn fan that this could get ugly, and it could get ugly quickly with the 1-2 punch of literally Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon in this case. But yeah, I begrudgingly I have to pick the Sooners.
Yeah, I don't think this one's going to be close at all. OU's going to win the game. Texas hasn't really impressed me much this year. The Notre Dame win looks less and less impressive every game that Notre Dame plays. Even the win against Syracuse this weekend wasn't that impressive. Not super convincing for me. And with their only other win against UTEP, there's no way to tell they can take a battle-tested team like Oklahoma down to the wire. So, like you said, it's a revenge game, and I see OU winning by at least 28 points.
Wow, bold prediction. The line now is at 10.5 for OU, I believe. So, could be some free money for anybody who is in Nevada this weekend.
Yeah, if you're
looking to bet on a game,
yeah, take that bet. It's going to be 28. You got to take it. So, we have our last listener question from J. Dallas O, who writes, it appears Tom Herman will have his pick between a number of high-profile jobs after this year. Where does he end up? Miles, I know you've talked about this a lot. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this is a tough one, Jordan. Of course, Tom Herman is going to have his pick of the jobs this summer if he decides to leave Houston, which is a big if. Of course, with all the speculation about Big 12 expansion, and it's no guarantee, but if Houston becomes a Power 5 conference member, Tom Herman will get a massive multi-million-dollar bonus from the University of Houston if he stays as their head coach. I don't know if there's a year stipulation on that, but it is something to look for or to watch out for if they do get admitted to the Big 12. A lot of factors in this. Does he like Houston? Does he feel like he's building a powerhouse program there? Of course, this summer or in this last recruiting class, they got the first 5-star to ever commit to a non-Power 5 program. So he is building an impressive program there. Will he want to maintain it? I don't know. If I had to speculate as to where he'd end up, Texas would definitely be the number one destination, I feel like. I don't see Charlie Strong staying there after this summer, especially if Texas keeps playing the way they do. Herman knows Texas. He knows how to recruit there. He's the hot commodity. He'll be able to demand whatever salary he wants, and Texas will pay it with all their big money donors. So if he does leave, that does seem like the natural landing spot for him. It looked like it was going to be potentially a bidding war between Texas and A&M. Texas and Texas A&M, just to clarify. But with Kevin Sumlin's resurgence this season and getting them in the top 10 again, it's looking like Texas is going to be definitely the number one candidate to sign Herman this summer.
Miles, I can definitely see him doing that. It's familiar hunting ground for him from a recruiting standpoint. I'll go ahead and give you my short list right now. This is in no particular order. I'll get to my top pick in a minute. But my short list right now, Texas, like you said, Charlie Strong's on his way out. He's really not performed to the expectations that he had coming in. And he's had a decent amount of time to give his impression, and really no improvement has been made from a culture standpoint or from a performance on the field standpoint. LSU, if Orgeron doesn't get that job, Herman's got to be at the top of their list. And, I mean, it's a great program. It's a chance for him to get in the SEC, and that's hard for a lot of coaches to turn down since the SEC has had so many great coaches that are all old now and will probably go out at the same time. Notre Dame, I don't think Brian Kelly's going to last there. They're far underperforming, very underwhelming compared to their expectations. And then USC, Clay Helton, the Clay Helton experiment has failed. And so at the end of the season, I'm sure he'll be gone. I bet they'll let him finish out the season, but I think he'll be gone by the end. So to get back to Tom himself, since 1998, which that's whenever he started his coaching career, Tom Herman has had 8 jobs since 1998, which is 18 years. That means he doesn't like to stay places very long. So to answer the question about whether he'll stay or not, I don't think so. I think he's hopping around until he can get to the best spot he can, and that's not Houston. And no matter what he makes it into, it'll never be Texas, it'll never be USC, Notre Dame, or LSU. It has its moment in the spotlight, though, like a Boise State with Chris Peterson.
Yeah, it's true. Seeing him go to Washington and now building up into a national competitor.
Right. I think he'll go back close to his alma mater. And his alma mater, of course, like everyone knows, was California Lutheran School in Thousand Oaks, California, which is about an hour drive from LA, which, of course, where SC is. So for those reasons, and on top of the fact that USC will pay him anything that he wants to go there, I think Tom Herman's going to end up at USC. On top of that, that's probably the last school I want to see him go to, just because in recent history, ever since Pete Carroll, coaches' careers have been destroyed there. Nobody's really done well. And so I think he's going to go there, and hopefully he can turn the tides, turn their fortune. As much as I despise USC, I want to see him succeed. Maybe Arkansas can convince him to come on as some coordinator. It won't happen, but you know what? It's worth a shot. You might as well give him a call.
Would you fire Bielema to get Tom Herman?
No, I wouldn't. And just based on the trend that Bielema has here, improving every season, he may not have had an instant rise to fame, but he's slowly changing the culture. He's getting his boys in here. All of his recruits are here now. Nobody from the Petrino era except one, which is Cody Walker, a sixth-year senior. But no, I would not trade him in. Bielema's doing a fantastic job. It just wouldn't make sense. That you're getting too greedy at that point. You just want instant success, which is almost never going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I agree with you that he's probably going to move, but I definitely disagree that he's going to USC. I do not think that's as good a job as people think. I think you've got Texas right there, a recruiting grounds he knows. And also, like you mentioned, they've got LSU. And unless Eddie O has a great season and a great audition for that head coaching job, that will probably be vacant again.
And let's not forget, Florida International, that job is wide open. He could get that job if he wanted.
Ron Turner's firing, the first fired coach of the season.
And it's one of the biggest campuses in the country.
Yes, so, and Florida, those are big recruiting grounds right there.
Unfortunately, it would be about the 7th or 8th best school in Florida. So obviously he won't make that move. But I see him moving to USC just because, for one reason, I hate USC. Well, I hate every single team on this list, to be perfectly honest. Of course, Arkansas and Texas were rivals in the Southwest Conference. Arkansas and LSU are now rivals. Notre Dame has a contract with NBC to get every single one of their games televised, which is a distinct recruiting advantage and is completely disgraceful on the part of the NCAA. And then USC was just too good for too long and had too many scandals and didn't really get in trouble until recently. None of those schools are appealing to me, but of course they all have a ton of money and a ton of power. He's going to end up at some powerhouse.
Yeah, if I had to rank them, I would say Texas, LSU. I guess you could persuade me to put USC third, but I think it's definitely going to be either Texas or LSU. On a little bit of a side note, also watch out for Art Briles to LSU.
Yeah,
that could be a move. Obviously, LSU wants to win, so they're not going to be afraid to hire a coach who obviously isn't afraid to run a dirty program and do whatever it takes to win.
That's LSU's mantra. I think that's actually written in their alma mater.
True fact. It is written in the LSU alma mater. All right, well, thanks for the questions, everybody. This is going to wrap up the third segment of this week's podcast. As you probably already know, we split it up into three parts this week, rather. First being the review of Week 5, the second being the preview of Week 6, and then what you're currently listening to, the listener mail segment. Thank you, everybody, for sending in your questions once again. Jordan, it's been great having you this week.
It's always a blast, and again, I would just like to reiterate, we want you guys to continue to spread the word. We're growing, and it's fantastic that people are getting to listen to a little bit more college football during the middle of the week. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with that. So keep up the great work, guys. We really appreciate your listening. We'll be back here next week. Until then, have a good one. Settle down to watch another great week of college football.